October 7th, 1884, 100 charter members from North Union Church in Indian Creek Chapel dedicated a new church to the service of God in a town called New Market that had been formed about 12 years prior to that. 129 years later, we sit in that very building. 129 years. Ray talked about commitment. That's kind of appropriate, actually. What does it take to carry a church 129 years and obviously still going strong? So what does it take? The new series we're going to take a look at is called From Convert to Evangelist. You got the pictures, Brittany? Okay. These are some old pictures that I dug up in a box that Dino had found. That's a picture during a revival. That's a postcard with the picture of the church on it. It looks like it's got a little cow lot pasture next to it. That's the sanctuary, once upon a time. A couple of the bulletins from when Calvin was the minister back in the 50s and 60s. So the new series is called From Convert to Evangelist. And for those of you in the back row, you might have to squint a little bit. But I changed the font on Convert and Evangelist for a reason. You see, when we're brought to Christ, we're a little rough around the edges. You know, we got these nodules and we're a little rough and we're not quite as refined as we should be. And we get to the point of evangelism when we've been walking with God for a while. You know, we seem to flow a little bit better. We've been educated. We've been discipled. We kind of know a little bit more about what we're talking about. Now, we're still kind of rough around the edges a little bit, but we know more about what it takes to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. Well, this series is a 3-part series. It's all about evangelism. Because I've noticed that when I say the word evangelist, a lot of people get scared. We automatically kind of think that it means we're on these bullhorns out on the corner of the street yelling, "You're going to hell if..." We do, don't we? I mean, it's in St. Louis, that was a normal... This lady always stood at Forest Park on 64, and she would stand at the overpasses. Cars would get off the interstate, and she'd be there with her bullhorn talking about how you need to repent and come to Jesus. Well, yes and no, okay? Yes and no. We're going to talk about evangelism, but before we talk about evangelism, we've got to talk about something else. We've got to talk about discipleship. Because you can't get to the point of evangelism if you're not being discipled. You have to be discipled. You have to be a disciple in order to become an evangelist. Ray talked about sharing our faith. If you're not a disciple, you're not going to share your faith, because evangelism is a natural consequence, if you will, to being properly discipled. It's why we struggle with it. Okay? New Market Christian Church has been going for 129 years. How'd they do that? You know, the old TV show. How did they do it? Well, let's look at that. How did they do that? Flip with me, if you would, to Luke 14. We're going to start in verse 25. Luke 14:25. While you guys are flipping there, just as a little side note, I looked in some of these things that Dean had found, and it had a list of the ministers from 1884 until now. It's about 31 ministers. One guy, the minister who had been here the longest, was 20 years, followed by George. George was 13. And then Kurt was right after him with 9. And I'm looking at this list of ministers, and I just kind of get this washing feeling over me of humility. And it's, you know, to see my name at the very bottom of that list is a very humbling thought. Of 31 guys who came before me and laid the foundation with a congregation. It just kind of proves over and over again that this isn't about me, and it isn't even about you. It's about him. Okay? Luke 14, verse 25. Now great crowds were traveling with him, so he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, wanting to build a tower, doesn't first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, after he has laid the foundation and cannot finish it, all the onlookers will begin to make fun of him, saying, this man started to build and wasn't able to finish. Or what king, going to war against another king, will not first sit down and decide if he is able, with 10,000, to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? If not, while the other is still far off, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. In the same way, therefore, every one of you who does not say goodbye to all of his possessions cannot be my disciple. Now salt is good, but if salt should lose its taste, how will it be made salty? It isn't fit for the soil or for the manure pile. They throw it out. Anyone who has ears should listen. We start off in Jesus. He just puts it out there. He always does. I mean, he's so confrontational. Everybody's like, well, Jesus came to bring peace. Well, yeah, he did. But he's also extremely confrontational, which is the conviction that I bring to the pulpit, is that my job is to sit here. If you're sitting in your pew and you're comfortable, I'm not doing my job. My job is to make you squirm in that seat. My job is to convict you. Because not only am I convicting you, I'm convicting me too. Because, yeah, I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. You see, Jesus, he had a great crowd following him, and they're traveling with him, and he turned around to him and he said, if anyone comes to me and he doesn't hate his own mother and father, wife and children, brothers and sisters, this is a passage that will separate the men from the boys. This is a passage that will separate the girls from the women. This is a passage that will separate the mature Christian from the Christian who is walking, living in milk. This is one of those passages that is an apparent contradiction. Because Jesus in other places says, love God and love your neighbor. And now he sits around, he turns around, and he says, anyone who doesn't hate his own family can't be my disciple. Well, here's where we really get into the meat of it. He's not telling you that you have to hate others. Did you remember what I told you where he says other places, love God and love others? He didn't say love others and then love God. No. He said love God and then love others. It's a matter of priority. Is God number one in your life? If God is not number one in your life, you are not doing something right. It's not a matter of if. You have to. You have got to put God first. That is not a choice. It is not a choice. You see, the love that we have for God should be so intense and so captivating of our every being that the love we show others looks like hate. That's how much we should love God. Okay? So that's his first little stipulation. It's not a contradiction. He's not contradicting himself. He doesn't do that. He's making a point. Okay? He's making a point. Like I said, this is the scriptures that separate the mature Christian from the infants. Okay? He's not contradicting himself. But more than that, he goes on, not only should you hate your family, father, mother, wife, children, brothers, and sisters. That'd be a breaking of the commandment right there. One of the 10 commandments. Honor your mother and father. But he goes on, and yes, even his own life. Even his own life. Not only are we supposed to put God above others, but we're supposed to put God above ourselves too. God cannot come before, because if you're putting yourself first, guess what that is? It's idolatry. That breaks the second commandment. It's idolatry. It's what it is. You can't put yourself first. He goes on, verse 27, whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not bear his own cross. This is all about submission and admission. You have to submit and admit. First of all, you have to submit to Jesus Christ, because when Jesus took the cross and he's carrying it to Golgotha, he has laid down his own will for the betterment of you and I. It literally picked up a cross of death, knowing that it's where he's going. He's going to die. It's not an if, it's a when now. Whoever does not pick up his own cross, you have to submit to him. You have to admit that he is not only Savior, not only has his blood covered you, not only is he the only way you're getting to heaven, to commune with God and other believers, but he is Lord of your life right here, right now. You hand every bit over to him. Every last bit. You don't hold on to anything, but we like to, don't we? We like to hold on to our own little stuff. You know, it's my stuff. It's my little corner of my heart that nobody can see, and we think that God can't see, but God really does see, and he already knows everything about us anyway. Give it up. Let it go. Don't hold on to it. It's going to drag you down. It's going to make you miserable. Lord knows we don't like to be miserable. I hate being miserable. I want to be happy. Hence the reason I sing all the time. Follow God's will and not yours. And bearing your own cross also is another. You have to be prepared for anything, okay? You have to be prepared for anything. He moves on in verses 28, 29, and 30, and he talks about counting the cost. He talks about how we are supposed to, if you go and build a house, okay, what do? You got to draw up plans for the architecture. If you don't do it, then you have to go see an architect to do it. And then you have to go talk to the contractors and the masons so that, that you can get the stone work done and the brick work done, and make sure you get the tuck pointing done, and make sure that it's up to code, and you get your electrician and you get your plumber, and you have to do all this planning, and then you actually have to build it. It takes a lot of planning, does it not, in order to build something? Yeah, exactly. Christ is telling you, have you sat down and counted up what it's going to cost you in order to follow me? It will cost you everything, and yet it'll cost you nothing. Count the cost. Are you planning? Have you planned for what it's going to cost you to follow him? He moves on. He gives another example. He says, or what king goes to war? And he's got 10,000 troops, and the guy that's coming to oppose him from the opposing nation has 20,000 troops. He sits down and says, okay, they're coming to attack me. Can I strategically get in position to where I'm on a high place and I can win this battle? Can I win this battle with only 10,000 troops? Or am I going to have to sacrifice something in order to try and make peace so he doesn't come and obliterate us? It's all about sacrifice. Sometimes, not only does it take planning, but we have to be willing to sacrifice of everything. The question is, are you willing to give up everything for him? Are you willing to do that? You got to be willing first. Okay? And he finally comes up with our third point in verse 33. He says, in the same way, therefore, every one of you who does not say goodbye to all of his possessions cannot be my disciple. What are you willing to give up, or what are you not willing to give up to follow Jesus? Verse 34, he says, now salt is good, but if salt should lose its taste, how is it going to be made salty? Salt does three things. Salt is a preservative. You can cure something, like cured ham or a sugar-cured salmon. Okay, it preserves. That's why your canned vegetables, it's one of the first ingredients is salt. Salt is a preservative. Number 2, salt adds flavor. Sometimes more than others. I try to cut back on the salt, but salt adds flavor. I can tell you as a chef, if you don't put any salt in anything and you let it go and you taste it, it's going to taste different than when you add salt to it. Salt brings out the natural flavors in all of the ingredients, and it helps meld it all together. You've got to add salt to a dish in order to bring it to full fruition, okay? So it adds flavor. And also, you ever been to a bar or a pub, and got a bite to eat, and they have those salty snacks sitting on the bar? Dave's nodding his head. Yep, yeah, they do, don't they? It's because salt makes you thirsty. You're going to drink more. That was the number 1 rule in my beverage class that I went through culinary school. Get salty snacks to put on the bar. You want to increase revenue? That's how you do it. For reasons of conscience, I more than one reason I had to step away from that business, because there are just some things in good conscience that I can't do. I can't do it, I can't encourage people to be an alcoholic. I can't do it. So, for more than one reason, I had to step away. But the point is that salt has its purpose. Okay? Christ compares a believer to being salt and light. Salt is a preservative. Christians are to be a preservative to this world. Christians are to be the flavor of life. We add flavor to things, and we also make them thirsty for God's word. We create this thirst in people. So Christ says, if you've lost this saltiness, if you've lost this purpose, you're no good. You're not good for anything but throwing you out, because you're not even good for the manure pile. That's saying something. Got a lot of farmers in here. You've scooped the hog lot or the cattle lot, and that's pretty bad when it's not even good for the manure pile. You're not good for anything. We can't, as Christians, lose our purpose. We cannot lose our saltiness. Christ uses cannot 3 times. Cannot be my disciple. Cannot be my disciple. Cannot be my disciple. I looked at that word. I wanted to know where that word is coming from. What does that mean? And it literally is translated. It's about 2 or 3 different words, and it's not able to be is what it. He's saying you're not able to be my disciple if you don't do this. It's not an if. It's not that you aren't a disciple. It's that you cannot be a disciple. You are not able to be a disciple of Christ if you're not, number 1, willing to put God first. You've got to put God first, because there is no exceptions to that. Put God first. Number 2, follow Christ. That means submitting yourself to Him. That means admitting that He's the Lord of your life. You see, I was baptized. I grew up Catholic, so I was baptized as an infant. And when I was in my mid-20s, I was re-baptized, this time immersed. And I came to the realization years later of why I did that, why God led me to be immersed. And I came to the conclusion that I had never made God the Lord of my life. Yeah, I had Him as my Savior, but He was never my Lord. It was all about what I wanted. It was all about what I wanted. I left my first wife, and I went to Chicago on this culinary track, and I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with these big-name chefs, and I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to be, one of those famous TV chefs. I wanted what I wanted. And yet, I got nowhere. And yet I got nowhere. And God convicted me and says, well, you know what, silly, if you'd have done what I told you the first time, things would have been different. So follow Christ. Admit that he is Lord of your life. And number 3, we have to sacrifice for him. Sometimes that means martyrdom. We hear of, especially in Islamic countries, where Christians are killed every day, literally for their faith. It can mean martyrdom, and ever increasingly in this world, in our country at least, I kind of think maybe that might be a possibility here too soon. But right now, we don't have to worry about martyrdom per se. But it most definitely means sacrificing your personal desires, your goals, your aspirations. That means sacrificing everything, laying everything aside to follow God. And let me tell you this, the more you walk with Christ authentically, for real Lord of your life, the more your will conform to God's. When I came into this gig, I say this all the time. You guys know that I got dragged into this kicking and screaming by God. I didn't want to be a minister. It was the last thing I wanted. And I did it out of obedience because that's what he was calling me to. But when I got that confirmation, and he kept giving me that confirmation, I was like, he moved me. He changed me. I found myself, I was wanting to do these things. I wanted to go and mentor with a pastor so that I could learn the ropes. I wanted to go and do hospital visits with him so that I could learn how to minister to somebody in one of those situations. I wanted to get up into the pulpit and preach the word. I wanted to do all of these things. So when you walk with God authentically, he will conform you to his image. It says it right in the Bible, Romans 8:28 and 29. He will conform you to Christ's image. It's the whole purpose. And through this, we cannot forget that we have to follow God's plan and trust that we have a purpose to fill. When I first started going back to church, we went to a church called Watson Terrace. It was on Watson Road in St. Louis. And we started going there, and there were maybe 25 people that attended every week. It's the Hill in St. Louis. It's a Catholic part of town. Catholics dominated it. They really did. So, it was kind of slim pickings of the Baptist church and the Christian church and, the Lutheran church on that road. It was just the way it was. So we had about 25 people, and next year their fiscal year ran from July to June, and when the elections came around, they asked me if I wanted to be a deacon. Yeah, sure. And I went to the pastor and I said, "What's that entail?" I have no idea what that means. I want to do it, but I don't know what it means. He explained to me what a deacon does. And he's like, a deacon's kind of a caretaker. He does work around the church, and, he can go on visits to the hospital with the pastor and these kind of things. I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. So we've mentored with Carl for a while, and the next year came around and they asked me if I wanted to be an elder. And I'm like, well, I don't know what that means either, but sure, yeah, that sounds good. Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. And I was the vice president of the board that year too. And as I was looking on it was God put us in the right spot to grow me very quickly. But that's not the way it should go. Because technically I was a new believer, and there was no way that I should have been in any one of those positions. But God grew me very, very quickly. You see, when new converts come in, the American church, sometimes we get this mentality that we need to get them in and get them busy. Ooh, somebody new. Let's get them involved in everything. Yeah. I love to do that too, but no. We can't do that to them because we are doing them an absolute disservice. The first thing that should have been done with me is that I needed to be taken aside. get involved with a Bible study, get involved with a new members class to teach me the ropes of Christianity, because I was Catholic. I knew what the Catholics did. I had no idea what the Protestant faith did. So when new converts come in, this is why I'm developing a new converts class. It's a Christianity 101 class for people that come in and are baptized, because they need 2 to 5 years minimum to learn, grow, become part of Sunday schools and Bible studies, take time to grow and learn and mentor with other people in the church. You have to get a foundation before you can start to build, right? Anybody who's a contractor or done any work with houses or buildings, you've got to lay a foundation first. And if you don't have that proper foundation, it will crumble. It will fall. It will fail. You want to know one place where we've failed in the American church? Discipleship. We have utterly failed new converts for a long time because we are not taking them in properly and showing them the ropes. You want to know how a church lasts 129 years? Because this church used to do that. I don't know what happened between then and now, but we don't have this new believer stuff. We don't have this designated program, and I hate calling it a program because it's not a program, but a plan of attack to gain a new believer, to get them to the point of a part of the crowd, a part of the congregation, a part of the evangelistic team, and sharing their gifts and talents. We don't have that plan. It's one of my first priorities. We've got to do this. We don't have a choice. Because within a month, we've had 2 new families come in here. I told you guys it was going to happen, did I not? It's going to happen, folks. We have to be prepared for this stuff. It's not an if, it's a matter of when. God is going to bring people to us, and if we are not prepared, we are going to fail. We are going to fall down flat on our face. We've got to be prepared. The very first sermon I preached here, remember, I don't, actually, you can shake your head. No, I don't expect you to remember. The very first sermon I preached, it was called, Why Do You Go to Church? And I went through and explained, and at the end, I tagged statistics on that. I want to remind you of those statistics. 76% of Americans claim Christianity. That's a pretty good number. But I also came across, that was in 2012. In 2008, I came across a study, and the link it'll be up. It's in your, no, I know what it is. We put it in the sermon notes, didn't we? That's right. We put the link in there. You can read the whole statistics on this, okay? But in 2008, 9% of Christians said that their faith was the most important thing in their life. 76% claim Christianity, but 9% say it's the most important thing in their life. We're doing something wrong. You want another statistic? Look back to 2006 in that same study. 16% claimed that it was the most important thing. I haven't found a more recent study. I'd be interested to know whether it's grown or dropped. I hear ministers say, well, we're being too harsh on the American church, and, the numbers are falling, but God is cleansing us. And yeah, you know what? That's the same thing of what I'm preaching. Yeah, our numbers are dropping because we're getting it down to the remnant level. God showed me that this past week. What God is doing to the American church, He's dwindling us down to the very strong core like He did Israel. He's getting us down to the very strong core so that when we rebuild, we are strong enough to rebuild because we have the right foundation. That's what He's doing in America. You got to dwindle it down before you can grow again. And that's what's happening here in America. So the solution to that is that we actually submit to the discipleship. We've gotten, oh man, it is so good to see so many people sitting in Bible study on Wednesday night. It is awesome, isn't it, Odie? I love seeing all those people come in. And it is just, it's went from that 4 or 5 group core to, at least a dozen every week. I love it. People are getting intrigued with what's going on. They want to know the Bible more. We're having discussion about real life issues that really matter, that need answers. That's how we're supposed to be. People come in and they have these questions. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to answer those questions. We're here to tackle those problems. We're here to encourage each other through those problems. The quote, the big idea. You got that up there, Brittany? There it is. It's a quote from Greg Laurie. This Greg Laurie is he's the president of Harvest Ministries. He is an evangelistic preacher. Yeah, Donna knows who he is. Yeah, I love Greg Laurie. This is a quote from him. He says, "Just because you are a Christian doesn't necessarily mean you are a disciple. Every disciple is a believer, but not every believer is a disciple." In other words, there are people sitting around our churches in our country who are not going to be in heaven because not every believer is a disciple. Are you a believer and are you discipling? Just because you claim Christianity doesn't mean you are one. It's all about the walk. Are you walking the walk, not just talking the talk? We come to invitation time. And I've got a book of illustrations, and this one struck me rather interestingly. And it's we're all about the evangelistic sermon series. So it goes as this: author Gary Thomas, the founder of the Center for Evangelical Spirituality, wrote in an article in the Discipleship Journal. Okay? And he says this: when my wife and I prayed extensively about buying a house, we gave God many opportunities to close the door. God appeared to bless the move. 5 years later, our house is worth considerably less than what we paid for it. Why didn't God stop us? My wife and I kept wondering. After all, we'd given him plenty of opportunities. But one day as my wife was praying, she sensed God asking her, "Have you ever considered that the possibility that I wanted you in that neighborhood to minister there rather than to bolster your financial equity?" Ooh. We thought of the people we'd been able to reach and then asked ourselves, are we willing to surrender to a God who would lead us to make a decision that turned out to be an undesirable financially, but profitable spiritually? Does obedience obligate God to bless us, or can obedience call us to sacrifice? God may lead you to some things in this world that may seem upside down. Completely upside down. Are you willing to follow God in those endeavors? When I made the decision to follow him, to lay down my will to what he wanted, when I made that decision to become a minister, I laid it all on the ground. I said, you know what? This is it. I will follow you no matter where you take me. I have an obligation to fill that. And it took me to Florida for 6 months. I'm still bitter about that one. Why? Why? Why would you move my family for 6 months? 1,200 miles. It doesn't make sense. But then again, neither does God. He's way beyond what we can ever comprehend of him. And sometimes his purposes are grander than what ours are. No, it doesn't make sense. But I always said that I will follow him wherever he leads. And thank God. Thank God I am here. I would not rather be anywhere else. I love you people. You are by far the best congregation I have ever had. No, I'm not just saying that. I love the people here. It is a different world. The Spirit is here, regardless of what people say. The Spirit is here. God is leading this. we in these prayer meetings, everybody that comes, Bill's been coming, and Dean and Ray, and I've seen Ethel and people pop in and out, and we've gotten answers, service, commitment, endurance, remnant. We've gotten these words that God is leading, and it's good. So let me offer that invitation. Are you a disciple? Have you taken that call of Jesus and made it official? Have you laid down your life and said, yes, I will follow you at all costs? Have you made that decision? If you haven't made that decision, make that decision today, because you don't know what truck is waiting to smash you on the way out that door. You don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. Don't wait. Do it today. If you've been sitting in that pew for a while, get that fire rekindled. Let's pray for you. Let's lay hands and let's get you fired up again. Stand and sing with me. We're going to sing Trust and Obey. I say that all the time. It's one of my favorite songs. But, the words to this song are absolutely perfect for what we're talking about today.